When I started Whole Food Rescue, I remember going down to the Jackson cupboard for the first time and seeing the faces of these people that need food, that need help, and it totally changed my world.
Hello, I'm Emmy DeGrappa. Each week, we bring you stories asking our guests the question, why? We learn about their passion, why they do what they do, why should we care, and what can we learn? What better place to explore the human landscape than from the state known for its incredible landscapes, Wyoming? And what better organization than Wyoming Humanities? Serving our state for over 45 years, we share stories, ideas, and wisdom about the human experience. This is What's Your Why? Today, we are talking to Ellie Dunford. She is the founder of Whole Food Rescue. Welcome, Ellie.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I want you to talk to me about your journey to start Whole Food Rescue, but actually, where did you grow up and how did you get to Jackson?
Well, I grew up in Boulder, Colorado, or actually kind of a little community on the outskirts of Boulder, and I went to college in Boulder, and there I started dating a man who was a dumpster diver. And before I met this gentleman, I had no idea that food waste was an issue. I had no idea that you could eat food out of the dumpster, but day after day, he would make me these exquisite meals from food that he had found in the trash. And, you know, everything you could buy in the grocery store. There was quinoa, there was bread, there was yogurt, meat products, all the produce. So he opened my eyes to this world of food waste. And from there, I actually started volunteering with an organization called Boulder Food Rescue, which was a big mentor to us in our development.
Just to define that, so define what it means to be a dumpster diver.
Well, you know, you could be a dumpster diver for anything. People will dumpster dive. Actually, in Boulder, at the end of the school year when all the students are moving out of the dorms, people are known to go dumpster diving behind the dorms to find lamps and alarm clocks and mattresses and all sorts of things that these college kids are throwing out at the end of each year. But for me in particular, I was a dumpster diver for food, and that just proved to be the most exciting, and, you know, it really paved the way for the rest of my life, at least the next 10 years, because it showed me this passion that I don't think I ever would have even known if it wasn't for this partner that I was dating and the Boulder Food Rescue that I was volunteering with.
Do you fear bacteria and sickness and things like that when you dumpster dive?
Well, you know, to an extent, if you are to eat food out of the trash, you do have to be aware of things that have been recalled or contaminated in some way. But I will say in my year plus of eating food out of the trash, I never got sick from eating that food that was in the garbage. And the biggest thing is that, you know, you have your senses, your eyes and your nose, and you can tell, and your taste, and you can tell if something's gone bad. So, you know, if you're looking through a dumpster, you're really clued into what food is good, what food is bad. Just as if you were looking through your refrigerator, you would be able to sense if food was good or bad. And so, you know, you take the good stuff and you leave the bad stuff. So, you know, you have to be cognizant and make sure to wash stuff. But the fact that I never got sick to me was big enough of an indicator that I really shouldn't be too scared.
How aware should we be of labels that say expires on this date? Is that just for a selling purpose? Is that for real? What is that?
So there's kind of a few ways to look at the expiration date. So there's a sell-by date, which that if you were to buy a jug of milk that has a sell-by date with that day's date on it, it would be fine for another 2 to 3 weeks because that product's pasteurized and all the bacteria that would be harmful has pretty much been killed. But what that date is for the grocery stores to stock and make sure that, you know, if they sell that product on that day, the customer can still take it home and have a good enough amount of time before it goes bad. Also, you know, if you're looking at an expiration date, think about how shelf stable something is. If it's a cracker, it probably will be good for a year. Bread, depending on how it's processed and how refined it is, it can be good for 2 weeks to a month. You can also freeze a lot of products. So if you see something with the expiration date approaching, just put it in your freezer and it will last a year or longer. And you can pull it out whenever you're ready to eat it. So, be aware of those dates, but also know that in a lot of ways they're meant to push product, and a lot of manufacturers will put the date of the highest quality. So this is when the food is at its peak quality, and they're guaranteeing that this is the taste, the texture that they were intending for the consumer to experience. But after that, they're no longer guaranteeing that same quality. But it doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that their brand is no longer standing behind the quality of it. So those things are oftentimes used to just push product and make people fearful, because when the stores have to throw stuff away, that means they just have to buy more product.
That's really interesting. And I'm just curious, when you were dumpster diving, what was your realization about food waste?
Oh, I realized that this is a huge issue. In the tiny town of Jackson, I was finding enough food to feed more than everybody I knew in one tiny dumpster. And I still think this often, but we're solving a problem of food waste in a tiny town in a tiny little part of America. And when you start to zoom out and look at food waste on this national or global scale, it becomes an immense issue, because even with our efforts, we're barely scratching the tip of the iceberg. We rescue 20,000 pounds of food a month. And like I said, we're this tiny community. So you think about food waste on the global spectrum, and it's a huge problem. And it's also a huge potential. There's a potential for people to make money with apps and selling rescued food, or somehow getting it to people that will pay for it. But it also is this amazing tool to feed people that don't have access to quality food. A lot of the food that gets thrown out is high quality produce, dairy, bread, meat products, things that are expensive, but that are necessary nourishment for everyone. So it's this amazing opportunity to take this issue and solve another issue of hunger and malnutrition.
And how do you think you can tackle that? How are you doing that? Are you going to shelters and homeless places? Is there a way for you to spread this message outside of Jackson?
Well, actually, yes. So we are a part of the Food Rescue Alliance, which came out of Boulder Food Rescue's efforts. And that is an incubator to support and promote the evolution of new food rescues. So they're working with food rescues all over the country, and there are some also out of the U.S. And so this idea is spreading, absolutely. And I think the key to food rescue success is utilizing existing distribution channels. So rather than opening a food pantry and saying, we've got all this food, hopefully people show up, we say, where are these people that need food assistance already going? So, they're already going to the senior center, or they're already going to the homeless shelter, or the low or no cost after school programming. So we utilize those networks rather than trying to recreate all these pathways that would be difficult to do. So the success is really in trying to just get the most bang for the least buck, piggybacking on people's efforts and their network.
What do you realize about the amount of food that restaurants produce and throw away?
Restaurants surprisingly are not that big of a contributor to food waste. Restaurants are pretty good at managing their inventory. They can make things on the fly. They can do specials, half price. They can turn things into employee meals. I think an issue within the restaurant industry is portion sizes. Oftentimes portions are much larger than a person would eat. And so if people aren't taking home their leftovers, then that stuff is getting wasted. And, we can't rescue stuff that's already gone out to the consumer. So that just becomes a product that would need to be composted.
So Jackson is Wyoming, and Wyoming is a rural community state. But what about in the city? How is your message translated into maybe New York City? Is there a food rescue there? Are you communicating with people like that?
So food rescue is not a new idea. Food banks and homeless shelters have been doing kind of these ad hoc rescue efforts probably since they started or open their doors. But the difference that's really happened in the last 5 to 10 years is that organizations are emerging with the sole focus of rescuing food. So rather than trying to make sure that someone's home is safe, or make sure that they have a roof over their head for the night and make sure they're staying out of trouble, our mission, our focus of these food rescue organizations is to get the food and to distribute it. So having that focus and those specialized skills and programs and resources to maximize our impact is really the big difference. So rather than having it just be this like auxiliary program, it's a focal point, and it just makes the whole thing elevate. Because, for example, in Jackson, when we started, we found, okay, there are food rescue efforts happening, but it's, maybe it's only 2 days a week from this grocery store or 1 day a week from this other grocery store. So we realized these other 5-6 days a week, food is getting thrown out. So that's really where we saw the potential, was in these missed opportunities. I have another thing I wanted to say about the restaurant question. So in thinking about food waste, the interesting and scary reality is that the consumer is actually the biggest producer of food waste. So along the entire distribution channel, from where the food is grown to the supermarket or to the consumer, the people that are buying the food are the biggest wasters. So imagine that you go into the grocery store and you buy 3 bags of groceries. Immediately throw one of those bags of groceries away, because that's how much the average consumer is throwing away. And for a family of 4, that looks like wasting anywhere between $1,600 and $2,200 a year on food that goes uneaten. So really thinking about the individual's responsibility in this problem is a way that people can get activated and become a part of the solution. Because, of course, food rescue on this, what we think of as a big scale when we rescue from these grocery stores, because it's 500 to 1,000 pounds every day from one store, it's like, wow, this is really meaningful. But when you step back and look at the big picture, it's like, no, what's really meaningful is each person's part in reducing food waste. So that's just some, hopefully, inspiration for everybody to look at your purchasing and your consumption habits and try to make some changes where you can.
Right. And so how does that compare with the rest of the world? Like, it sounds like Americans are huge food wasters. We take too much for granted, maybe. And how does that measure up to other countries?
That's a great point. We do take things for granted. So what I found is that first world countries are often the countries that waste the most food, and it's because we have the most food and we have it easily. We don't have to grow our food. We don't have to kill our food. We get to go to a grocery store and we're completely detached to what it takes to actually bring that food onto our tables. And so therefore we feel less emotionally connected to it, and we're okay wasting it. If you look at second and third world countries, so much more hard work and time goes into producing food for yourself and your family, that there is minimal waste. That's I think the biggest difference between the first and the third world countries as you look at food waste.
And so how can we educate the public about how to change their habits? Is it going to the grocery store every day instead of going once a week? I mean, what are the habits that we have that we could change that would make a difference?
Well, that's definitely a big one. A lot of people get in the habit of doing, one big grocery stop a week. And without meal planning, a lot of that food you buy could go to waste, because you end up going to a friend's for dinner, or you go out to dinner, or you work late and you end up just snacking. So many variables can throw your plan or your quasi-plan off schedule. And so buying more frequently and less volume of food will help you mitigate waste just on its own. But also meal planning, really getting diligent about thinking, if I'm going to use half a pepper in my tacos, where, the next day or 2 days later, can I incorporate that half pepper? Maybe it's a snack. Maybe I use it for dip, like a hummus dip for a snack one day. So thinking about, when you buy a product, how am I going to be able to utilize all of it if I can't use it in this one meal? And I know, like, even for myself, when I buy a bunch of cilantro, I find myself throwing half of it away. And I'm like, this is a total shame. And so, even myself working in this industry, I'm guilty of it. And I think as I'm saying this, I'm like, I need to work on my meal planning to help mitigate my impact, because I don't want to be wasting that half bunch of cilantro. And it really just takes a lot of intention to do those things.
So what do you think in terms of education and helping people to learn that, shopping for a week of food probably isn't a good idea? Like you say, people's plans change, and I know that's happened to me. And then I'm looking at a refrigerator full of food. Mm-hmm. So in one day, I'll just like cook a ton of stuff because I don't want to waste anything. But when people come to this realization, how do their habits change? Have you seen people's habits change? Do you think it's made a difference?
I don't really know. I don't have any insight on people's home lives. I will say that from my experience, I think the biggest impact comes actually from when we go into schools and educate the kids. I've heard many success stories of kids going home and saying, Mom, we need to change our habit in this way, or I need to eat all my lunch, and if I don't, I want you to put it back in the fridge so I can add it to my lunch for the next day. So educating the youth and having them teach their parents is seeming to be a really viable pathway for educating people. But other than that, I don't know. It's really hard to disseminate information when you're getting calls and advertisements and your attention is being pulled in 1,000 ways every day. I know the statistic of how many advertisements the average person sees in a day is astronomical. It's in the, tens of thousands of advertisements we see a day. So, you think about how impactful would it be for me to somehow squeeze in like here's a tip to reduce food waste. But I know that the National Resource Defense Council is working on a national campaign to reduce food waste, and they've got big signs in big cities like New York and San Francisco. And who knows if it's making a difference, but...
Well, it's a great effort. I think, we live in a small community, and it's considered one of the wealthiest communities in the United States. And so I think for me, it's hard because I think it is important here, even though we're the wealthiest community in the United States. But I wonder how we can make a difference in the poorest community in the United States. That, because we experience so much and we have so much. And how do we actually make that jump to help another community let's say the Wind River Reservation, which has lots of poverty. How can we make that jump to help another community?
So that's definitely something we've talked about really ever since the beginning. Was I think we have more food in this community than our community needs. So how can we get it elsewhere? And we've definitely recognized these satellite communities that do not have the resources that we have. And we've played around with a lot of ideas of packaging up preparing and packing meals and freezing them, and then a couple times a month driving these prepared meals to these satellite communities. We are, and I don't know if this makes sense to put on air, but we are playing with the idea of starting a food rescue in Victor. So that wouldn't actually mean we would take Jackson's food and bring it to Victor and Driggs, but we would start rescuing food from the Brolums and all of those grocery stores on that side, and trying to set up the same model and support that community in their efforts. But I don't know. Really the sky is the limit, and it's just a matter of how do we strategize and prioritize to have a greater impact. Something we do struggle with a lot, though, is trying to understand our local impact. Really, how many people are we serving? We get these numbers from the organizations that we give the food to, but they're pretty loose, and even trying to understand how many people are in need in Teton County is kind of a gamble. We don't really know those things. So in a lot of ways, I feel like we're taking shots into the night and seeing what we hit. So that's been our strategy up until now, and we're working with our board to come up with our next big idea. And like I said, maybe it's the expansion into Idaho. We've also talked about doing a Pay What You Can cafe, which is there are about 60 of these around the country, and the first one actually started in Salt Lake City, Utah. And the idea is you would go in and pay what you could for a meal. So if that was full price, you would pay that. If that was $3, you would pay that. If it was nothing, you could pay nothing, or you could volunteer an hour of your time in exchange for your meal. So that's another potential that we're looking into as a way of diversifying what resources are available for people.
So I guess my last question is the poverty in Jackson greater than I think? Because maybe the people who are in need are so hidden that you don't see them. And they're there, but we just don't see them, and we don't know who they are.
Absolutely. Yeah. They are here, and you will not see them unless you start looking for them. When I started Whole Food Rescue, I remember going down to the Jackson cupboard for the first time and seeing the faces of these people that need food, that need help. And it totally changed my world. It changed my entire perspective of what need looked like, of the fact that there could be need in the wealthiest community in the history of the world. They're here. And I think first step, realizing that, and second step, figuring out how do we pull these people out from the shadows. That's a hard thing. And a lot of these people are immigrants that are fearful for their safety and for their family's safety. So going out and accessing these resources that are available, sometimes they're just not willing to take the risk to go out and do those things. So unfortunately, a lot of people, even though we have the resources, they're not utilizing them. But as far as I know, from the 2015 Public Health Needs Assessment, there were an estimated 3,000 people in our community that were deemed food insecure. But then on top of that, we started looking into this demographic called ALICE. It's asset limited, income constrained, and employed. So it's a person that is working, but they don't have a big savings account. They don't have a house. They don't have really any assets. So if something was to happen, like they would lose their job or they would incur an injury, they really will go into that poverty state immediately. And so it's supporting people like that so that they can start to build up more financial security through savings and through various other resources. So that's a whole other thing beyond these classically defined food insecure people, is just the people that are scraping by. And it's not just the ski bums. It's people that are working hard, that are trying to support their families. And in a place like Jackson, it's really hard to get ahead.
What keeps you awake at night?
Oh, man. Well, right now it's planning my wedding.
Okay, that'll do it.
Yeah, that will do it. But, in the early days, we're about to turn 5 as an organization. In the early days, I would stay up thinking about just like, is this really going to happen? How am I going to pull this off? And, looking back at it now, it's like, this really happened and we pulled it off. So now, I go to bed feeling so good about what we've done and stressed out because there's always more work to do. And, we want to do more, but I just feel like we've already made such an impact and we've built such a core group of supporters and volunteers and donors that whatever we decide to do, I know that we're going to be able to do it. So that helps me sleep at night, just knowing that we are going to be able to keep doing more and doing good work.
Oh, congratulations, Allie. It's been good talking to you.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of What's Your Why, a production of Think Why, Wyoming Humanities. This has been executive producer Emmy DeGrappa. Please subscribe and never miss a show. For more information, go to thinkwhy.org.